Right, good afternoon, councillors and members of the public, if you're listening, and co-opted members. I'm Councillor Tony Eason. I'm chair of the meeting today in the sort of absence of Andrew, who's stuck in mid-Wales, but he will be joining in online if he can. So I'm holding the fort for him. First of all, can we take apologies for absence, please?
There's apologies for absence from County Councillor David Jones.
David Jones, okay. And I see we've got Councillor Callard online joining us. Are there any declarations of interest that you need to issue at the moment? No. And have we got a public open forum? Are any members of the public online, or nobody in the chamber? So I take it we have no. Sorry. We'll note the action list from the previous meeting straight away. I think there's only one item on there which I think is ongoing, and will probably stay on there till the next meeting. Is that correct, Peter? I think it's got in there. So the next item on the agenda would have been the draft annual government statement, but because we got a report from SRS, Mike Corcoran, we'll take you straight away so you can get in the report, say what you've got to say, ask questions from the members, and then you can leave. It's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The report that's attached is the Shared Resource Service Annual Internal Audit Report for 23-24. The key points of the report is the opinion is satisfactory. That basically means the risks we identified were medium and or low. There were no individual reports that were classified as high or critical risk. In terms of the work we undertook, it was 12 audits, 4 systems, 6 follow-ups, and 2 sort of special stroke consultancy. 2 of them were high risk, 2 medium risk, 8 low risk. It's important to say that the risk is now set by the shared resource service staff themselves, not just our view of it. The opinions were 3 substantial and 9 full. The result was 18 issues, 15 medium, 3 low. They've all been agreed with management. There's a response, an officer, and a target date. We did have to flex the plan again in the latter half of the year, and it's the first time that an audit was not completed by the year end. That was due to the issues of staff availability, but that's now been completed. Moving on to the 24-25 plan, that's underway. That contains 8 systems audits and 3 follow-up audits. And I think the overall conclusion is that the direction of travel for control is still good, and the issues are still on a downward trend, although they are up on last year slightly. I can take any questions if anybody has any.
Councillor Murphy. Mr. Beale.
Thanks, Mike. Are there any areas that you've got concerns about? I take the point that everything's in hand, but are there any sort of things on the horizon that you think may be causing some difficulty, that ought to have a bit more attention than they are currently getting?
Going forward, no, not at the moment, from what I know. The one issue that the one audit we couldn't complete in the year, that did highlight an issue of a single point of failure for one individual. But with the management response and the action going forward, that will resolve that in future.
Are there any other questions from members? Martin?
Yeah. Hi, Mike. Thanks for the report. If I'm right in recalling, this is the only report we get each year from the SRS. That being the case, I'm a little bit sort of struggling to actually understand some of the things you've actually done. For example, I have no clue what Solar Winds is. I have no clue what Halo is. And, you know, I would really appreciate a couple of paragraphs in each one next time, because we're supposed to be here giving this some scrutiny, and I can't give it any scrutiny right now. They're just a list of words and your opinions, which I think it's reassuring to know that there aren't any issues, but I don't quite know what you've done because I don't know what those areas are. Which turns me to my other question, my real substantive question is on page 7 of the report, page 55 of the bundle. It talks about the implications on the 24-25 audit plan, and there's the list, and it says the internal audit plan has been agreed with management. I'd just like to understand a little bit more about what that agreement process is. And secondly, because I see one limited assurance for carry follow-up, I guess, and I just wonder whether there's a longer list. What's the range of areas you look at? And I'd like to see more of a plan as to what all the activities are across the next 2-3 years, and just have a clue as to what things aren't you looking at and why these rather than others. And none of that's in this report. So thanks, Mike.
Any comment, Mike?
Yeah, that's quite a lot of questions. I may miss a few, but I'll try and get to them all. It's not the only report we produce. We produce quarterly updates, which I believe come through to you as well. They are issued, as are individual reports issued through to Jan. Peter would get them, obviously, as well. The agreement process, we basically meet with the SRS prior to the end of the year for the start of next year. The plan then takes knowledge from things like digital strategies, risk registers, etc. So the plan should be risk-based, it should be current, should be focused on what needs to be done. The limited opinion, it was in relation to IT disposals. That's an audit that's due in Q2, so there will be a revised opinion, obviously, on that, which I'm sure would be different to limited this time. We do have an audit universe. It does change, it changes a lot. I could probably put one together for you, but I'm not sure of what real relevance it would be to you.
Okay, thanks. So just follow up on that. There may well be reports floating in ether. They don't come to this committee. So I think there's a way of making sure this committee actually has proper sight of the appropriate level of documents. That's probably a conversation we can take offline. But that's helpful to understand where we are. I guess, Michael, just to follow up, you have a 2-3 year plan, and I presume you had a long list of audits which you were going to do in 24-25, of which this is the final list. There's a process for agreeing that, and I just wonder if you can tell us what the kind of process is. Is that just with the SRS board, or is that a process of input from every authority?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The process that we have is obviously we have an audit universe which can be split over 3 years, 5 years, depending on the risk of the entity and the time you need to cover it over. We have a list of items from that we take into the meeting with the SRS management. Again, we ask them what's new, what are they going to be doing this year, what are they going to be focusing on to bring through those. And as I say, we take an individual partner's risk register, their digital strategies or the other terms that they're called. Then we sort of put them all in the mangle, come up with a plan. That's agreed with SRS management in terms of being what needs to be focused on. That goes through to the Finance and Governance Board and is agreed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Any more questions?
Quickly jump in there, Chair?
Yeah, go on.
Mike, are those quarterly reports more for the Governance and Audit Board and Finance Board, or I mean, in other words, are they more management focused than member focused?
Thank you for that. I'm not sure if management focus is the correct term that I would use, but there is more detail in them. There's sort of a summary of the work, a summary of the individual reports that are drawn together. And if there are any key issues at that time, we point those out as well.
Okay, thank you. We got nobody online, no councillors online. Andrew, can I bring you in as official chair to make your comments?
From my perspective, thank you, Mike. Very helpful. I do wonder whether those quarterly reports could be circulated for information, because I think in part that will help address Martin's question around context, or understanding some detail around the areas you've looked at. So perhaps you could speak to Jan and consider whether those quarterly reports could be circulated to members, just to really build up our understanding. Apart from that, I think I'm content with what I've read and heard. Thank you, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Mike, we're going to go on to the next item, will be the audit report on digital strategy. I don't know whether you want to stay and listen to that with us, but if you don't, it's up to you. Thank you for your report.
Thank you. I'll hang on for some because they're of interest to me. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Can we now go to the Audit Wales Digital Review Report? Who's presenting this? John, Jason, or Charlotte?
I will be, thank you. Right, okay, thanks very much. Okay, I'll just shift my documents around on screen so I can see it nice and clear. Okay, so we reviewed the Council's strategy approach to digital, specifically the extent to which it has been developed in accordance with the Sustainable Development Principle, and that it will help to secure value for money in the use of the Council's resources. That's how we started off in our report. When we looked into this, when we carried out the fieldwork, we looked at document reviews and interviews with a sample of cabinet members, senior officers. And the key question we looked to answer was, in developing its digital strategy, has the Council acted in accordance with the Sustainable Development Principle and put in place proper arrangements to secure value for money in the use of its resources? We asked, is the Council's digital strategy informed by a good understanding of current and future trends? Do they have a clear vision of what is to be achieved and what they want to achieve? Have they got the right people and partners involved in designing and delivering the strategy? Is that strategy resourced for delivery? Is there monitoring in place to monitor and review the progress on the strategy? And are lessons being learnt on its development and how it is working out? We looked at a bundle of documents which is included in the previous strategy, and the Council's previous digital strategy document covered the period 2018 to 21. This audit that we carried out was in 23, so it was a couple of years later. So at the time, there was 2 years since then. The current approach to digital is facilitated through 3 separate business documents. We saw digital design, innovation, information governance and security, and performance and data insight documents had digital contained within them as a part of them. But what we found was the Council does not have a clearly articulated strategic approach to digital. Now, we're not necessarily saying the Council does not have a strategic approach to digital, but it was a clearly articulated strategic approach to digital. What we found was that the Council currently didn't have a digital strategy. As I noted earlier, the 2018-21 copy was the last document digital strategy. And the Council had not articulated its overall approach to digital. So no clear and widely understood vision was being shared among members and officers. At the time of the fieldwork, the Council had not had its active strategy, but it was in the early stage of considering the development of a new replacement strategy. And some digital developments were currently running across some service areas. Despite work in addressing digital needs across individual service areas, we felt that without a clear vision and a strategic approach to digital, the Council risked duplication and then missing the opportunities by not identifying potential benefits that can be gained from use of digital across all of its service areas. We added that once then the Council has a clear vision for digital, it will be important for that to be clearly communicated Council-wide. We went on to consider that the Council has not drawn on a wide range of evidence sources to help inform the development of its strategic approach to digital. In the evidence we saw that the Council has not drawn on a broad range of evidence. There was a lot of data used from things such as self-assessment reports, demonstrated data was being used, wellbeing assessment, 22, corporate business plan, and so on. And there was some review work which had taken place around service areas which included looking at assessing call demands levels and reasons behind calls, monitor complaints processes, and so on. However, the review found the evidence the council has drawn on was limited. And what we felt was the council has drawn on some evidence to understand the underlying causes of current demands and issues to be addressed. And it had also, talking of SRS, it also does work through SRS and some collaboration, business and collaboration board in considering future trends. However, we felt the council risks developing a strategic approach that may not meet the needs of its communities or deliver value for money as a result. Our next finding was around the council has not mapped out which partners it could work with or set out plans to involve the full diversity of the population in developing its strategic approach to digital. We couldn't see that where the council was able to demonstrate it identified all relevant people and partners to design and develop a new digital strategy. As I said, shared resources services, and collaborative initiatives with other public sector partners, some of that was taking place. But the council has not mapped out effectively how and who it could work with by way of partners and potential partners to give assurance it's identified all suitable opportunities for partnership working. And we felt that by not identifying all partners and potential partners or opportunities for collaboration, the council then risks missing opportunities to improve, again, value for money and delivery of services and benefits that might come along with that. So at the time of our field work, the council had not developed specific plans to involve local communities also, including service users in the process of designing and developing a future or its new digital strategy. With regards to costing of a strategy, our finding was that the council has not costed its digital strategy, limiting its ability to monitor the value for money of its approach. The council hadn't costed its strategic approach to digital in the short term, and the longer term resources which are then required to deliver it had not been fully identified or not been identified. And that included any anticipated savings that might come from that. Some resources for digital work were identified in service business plans, as I mentioned previous. And the council had ring-fenced, there was budget ring-fence for things such as shared resource services, SRS, and the council's strategic approach overall is not, however, costed, making it difficult to then monitor value for money. So in our other finding, the absence of a digital strategy with clear objectives and measures, the council's ability to monitor and assess value for money from its digital strategy is limited. So I couldn't read my own word in my own writing. It would be limited. So the ability to monitor something where measures haven't been set clearly because the strategy hasn't been clearly articulated will be limited. So in the absence of a digital strategy, there's no reporting or progress against short, medium, and long-term strategic objectives in relation to the council's overall strategic approach to digital. And that, of course, would make it difficult to monitor the impact of a strategic approach. And then finally, council does not systematically review the effectiveness of its strategic approach to digital or share lessons learned. The council was found not to have reviewed its previous digital strategy. The council had learned lessons through its response to COVID-19, however, and that had been seen to shape a lot of its service delivery, regards to increasing online access to certain services for vulnerable adults and so on, so that there had been a learning evidence within there. The council has developed project charters to record, review and learn lessons by evaluating projects during their life cycle, and that was another example of where elements had been seen of review and lessons learned. But by not reviewing its wider strategic approach to digital, the council will risk missing opportunities to improve processes, outcomes and arrangements to secure value for money. Having gone through that and those findings, we came with 4 recommendations. And that was that the council should develop and clearly articulate a strategic approach to digital, that the council should strengthen its arrangements for monitoring and reviewing the delivery of that strategy, that the council should strengthen engagement with the full diversity of those with an interest in the delivery of the strategic approach to digital, and that the council should map out all potential collaborative opportunities to deliver its next digital strategy. The council then has responded with its organisational response form, and that was considered sufficient and appropriate in the response to our recommendations. Just something to add into this, because the new reporting format that we do is it is shorter, as you'll have seen. It's more direct, and it contains less context than previous reports might have. And I'm clear from the organisational response form that came back, the work is underway at the council since fieldwork. And that's been clearly noted within that response form. And that does provide us with assurance that matters are being dealt with and progressing. I think that's the gist of it. I could go into a little bit more detail, of course, but I won't. I've taken enough minutes as it is. But that's the gist of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jason. We'll take some questions on the floor. Peter first. Phil, sorry, first.
Thanks for that, Jason. This is a public document, and it covers just about every aspect of the council's activities. In that you take in partnership work, and you take in this, that, and the other, all sorts of aspects of the governance of the authority. The one thing the report doesn't say is what you mean by digital. It's an all-embracing word that assumes that everybody knows what it is that you're talking about. Are they to assume that it's all to do with putting everything online, or can you see my point? There's no actual definition in this report at all.
I can, yes. I mean, digital within the council's own definition of digital will clearly be within, something that develops as we've gone on. It's something which will be in your previous strategy, and I'm sure you will have a definition in-house for that as well. I mean, we've looked at this in the context of the Welsh digital strategy, the Welsh government, and in the terms, the term digital in essence it's about using technology to improve things. It's about how organisations can be more productive, access to services can be more efficient and productive, how it helps organisations to develop services that meets the needs of customers, and that is using not just technology and equipment, but processes. And it's to a great extent, it's not just a tool, but it's a culture as well as a method of accessing services. The Welsh government's state that digital in Wales will improve the quality of life, sustainability, economic growth, create user-centred public services, supported by effective leadership, data and culture of innovation and collaboration. But it is fair to recognise that what we've done as Audit Wales, we've come in and we've looked at your digital strategy, what your approach to digital is, how you define digital, how you will actually map out your work in the area of digital, and what you will do. And we've measured that against our criteria, which would have been included in this project brief at the start. So even though we hit into like lots of other areas, we were quite specific in answering the questions within our audit criteria. But yeah, I do agree. I mean, if you ask 20 people, each will give you a different definition of digital. It is, and having taught digital literacy myself in a previous sort of role, I actually do find often that it's quite difficult to contain, other than to state it's cultural, it's a tool, it's about delivering, it's about using it as a tool to deliver services. And it's not just sort of like the IT department or the process, it's about the whole approach and how digital technology is used within that approach. Not a straightforward answer, I'm afraid.
No, but you did pretty well, fair play. Just as a final shot, it was good to hear that progress is being made. So,
okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Go on. Sorry. Go on.
So was that to me?
I think yes. My hands up function is working now, and I got Peter on the line, and then Rodri after that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, picking up on some of those points, clearly this report is to a large degree historic rather than current, and that's been accepted. And in relation to that, it should be noted that tomorrow's agenda for the Performance and Overview Committee here at MCC will actually be engaged in pre-decision scrutiny of the strategy. Yeah, and I know in relation to the sort of points that you raised just now and that Councillor Murphy raised, that we're calling it a digital and data strategy, which seems to make more sense to me, because it's not just about using digital facilities to collect data, but how you actually use them. As you say, it's a tool, and as pleased to see in the report, there are a number of so-called real-life strategies as to how different employees, different residents could actually use the material that we collect and that are fed to them. Presumably, this is the question that's coming at the end of this. Presumably, Audit Wales will at some stage look at that strategy and give us a report on that as to how fit it is for purpose. What would be the sort of time scale before we're likely to get a report on a newly adopted strategy?
Do you want me to come in?
Yes, yeah, I was going to ask you actually.
Thanks. We're now sort of beginning the more routine sort of follow-up process. We'll be following up on the recommendations in our previous reports. We would tend to give council sort of usually at least a year, depending on the timing in their organisational response form in which they intend to respond to it. Because this report has been delayed coming out, obviously a lot of work has happened in the meantime, so we can look at this a bit sooner than we otherwise would. As part of our annual assurance and risk assessment work, we will look at the digital strategy. It'll be quite a high-level overview, but what we will do over the next 12 months is to look at that in a bit more detail and to provide some feedback to the council in terms of how we feel that they've responded to the recommendations and to what extent that the new digital and data strategy sort of, I suppose, takes on board those recommendations and fills in some of those areas that previously we felt that there were some gaps.
Okay, thank you.
I can't give you an exact timescale at the moment, I'm afraid, but I would anticipate it'd probably be within the next 12 months.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. I'd like to bring Rodri in now, and then possibly after that we can go to Richard, because I see we've got a response from Monmouthshire County Council which we need to talk to as well.
Yeah, that was actually what mine was about. It was more of an opportunity for Peter, because it's quite a start. There's some quite start language in there, and obviously this is a public meeting, the public documents, and it was in reference to the previous digital strategy, which covered a 4-year period. I just thought it'd be a good opportunity, just if you wanted to just talk about why it expired, what was put in place, and if there seemed to be a void, was there any possibility of it rolling over or anything like that whilst you created a new one?
Okay, thank you. We've had a supplementary report from Monmouthshire, so who's going to talk on it, Peter or Richard?
Rich, do you want to come in first?
Okay, thank you for that, and I think probably between us will answer some of those questions as well. I think thank you for Councillor Strong for bringing attention to the digital and data strategy that's been developed as well. I think thank you first of all for Jason, Charlotte and colleagues for the report and for their engagement and feedback during the process. I think probably helpful to start with a bit of context, which I think Jason mentioned as well, that at the point of starting this review, the council had just approved its community and corporate plan and was then subsequently starting the cycle of refreshing its suite of enabling strategies to support its delivery. And in agreement with Audit Wales, we discussed that this report would be timely to inform that development of that strategy, recognising the arrangements that were in place before and were interimly in place to support its delivery, which I think probably links to your question, Rodri, about the arrangements that were in place, particularly guided through, sort of as Jason I think mentioned as well, the arrangements for the digital innovation service business plan, the digital roadmap, and continued charter that digital colleagues are working to. But I'll let Peter sort of come in a bit more on that later. So that very much shapes, I suppose, the nature of our response, given the timing and context of the review, and this would then inform the development of that strategy. And as you can see from our response, We've chosen to develop a digital and data strategy, recognising the synergies between the two in terms of digital being systems that collect data, and then you have to use the data to inform delivery and also inform and understand better service need, residents need, and adopt and design services to fit that. So it's very much at the heart of our future digital and data vision. It's about being data enabled and it's about being data driven. And I think that probably alludes also to Councillor Murphy's point about how we see digital but also data as an organisation in delivering our objectives in the community and corporate plan and the future of our services. So in terms of the specific recommendations, recommendation 1 is very much the strategy sets our strategic approach. Recommendation 2 about arrangements for monitoring review, those are embedded in the strategy in terms of how we're going to undertake that monitoring review and the arrangements we'll have in place. I think probably aligned to the question about when Audit Wales will review it, the strategy sets our direction. We then have to enable and deliver that direction and make sure we are evaluating regularly that we are on that path. So hopefully we can perhaps pick off offline, Charlotte, conversations about how we can make sure that timing works for both of us and obviously giving assurance rightly back to this committee about the recommendations. But I think that's probably the key point I make overriding all this, whether it's engaging with staff, whether it's working collaboratively, whether it's monitoring our arrangements. We have a vision, we have some themes, we have some actions. The field of digital and data is fast-paced, fast-moving. Engagement, looking at collaborative opportunities, won't stand still. We'll need to keep up with that and try and keep pace the best we can with that through the strategy. And hopefully you'll see through the arrangements we've set out how we'll try and do that. And obviously we'll report back through those mechanisms how we achieve that. And obviously work with Audit Wales as well to get their perspective on that and learning from other reviews around Wales they've done as well. So this is some perspective for me. Peter, may you want to have more?
Thanks, Rich. Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Executive. I've got portfolio responsibility for digital. Thank Audit Wales for the report. I think they're acknowledging, I guess, the timeliness of the report coming through and obviously the work that we've progressed in the interim period. Thanks, Councillor Strong, echoing Richard's point, just in terms of the fact that, we're well advanced in terms of the digital data strategy, which is going through scrutiny tomorrow and onward to Cabinet for consideration next week. And I think as Richard's captured, and I don't need to talk to the detail of it because he has, the salient points and recommendations from Audit Wales report have been captured thereon in the development of the strategy, and obviously all of those other aspects that you'd ordinarily expect to feature as well, both in terms of the performance measurement framework and making sure we're really clear on outcomes, strength of governance in terms of a digital and data board being established, which is not just to service the needs of the digital data strategy, but also in terms of strengthening, I think, some of the governance that we have in the interplay with the SRS and the other local authority partners, where there's quite a fair bit of opportunity on the collaboration front that, again, Rich just acknowledged. So, I'm certainly confident in terms of what's coming to the fore. We've had a fair bit of constructive challenge, discussion, engagement through DMTs, through Directorate Management teams, Strategic Leadership team, with Cabinet informally, and in particular from Councillor Callard, who's on the call today, as much as the leader. So, I'm pretty sure it's withstood the test of extensive level of engagement in its development. I try not to be too defensive, but I guess there's probably two things to draw out. First off is this point of context. So I just want to set the record straight slightly in the sense of, I think, Jason, I think if somebody was probably listening to the live stream, they may interpret the fact that we had no strategic approach, that we had none of those arrangements that you listed out in place. And I just want to make it clear that wasn't the case. And I think the body of the report acknowledges that in its various parts. So not picking them out in the exhaustive list, but just to sort of highlight that we have well-established collaborations. We have the most mature technology collaboration with the SRS in Wales as a public bodies, which is looking to evolve further, I would hope, in the digital data space as well, to bring that whole DDAT model together. And we have very strong ongoing relationships with the likes of CDPS, through WLGA, Soccertim, I could go on. So again, we're not operating in a vacuum and a void here. These things are in place. Similarly, in terms of all of the work that we do out there in terms of digital design and innovation, it is predicated and built upon user-centered design principles. So you need to understand your user and your customer in the design of the work that we do. I know, Jason, that that's being acknowledged. I also understand that the front-end point is that we just didn't have a strategy there that was current, that didn't capture those things. I'm just making the point that those things were all there and operating. The thing I do want to just echo just to Richard's front-end input in terms of this is a really important bit of context. So I think Jason acknowledged the duration of the previous strategy, which ran from 2018 to 21, I think it was confirmed as being. If we just reflect for a moment, the local government election took place in May 2022. And as Richard confirmed in his input, it is ordinarily, in most local authorities, the case where the suite of enabling strategies will be driven by a new administration taking up office of the same colour or different, and then a corporate plan, community corporate plan, being developed and approved, and then the suite of enabling strategies to allow that corporate plan to be delivered, to be put in train, for them to be refreshed and updated. So with the decision-making process through the chamber, through that first 12, 13, 14 months, I think the community and corporate plan was approved on its third time of asking. In, I think, Rich, April 2023. So it was only after that point that we were in a position in having an approved community and corporate plan to therefore, and then instigate work on the digital data strategy. And obviously we worked with Audit Wales in making that known at the front end of this field work being undertaken. So this point of not operating in a vacuum, we had a strategy. Yes, it time-lapsed in 2021. It was the pandemic. And the question we asked ourselves back as digital teams, in terms of this, myself and through leadership, was what were the bedrock principles that underpinned that strategy still fit for purpose? Whilst we obviously came out of the pandemic as we worked through the local government election, and what I've just discussed, and the answer to that was yes. And therefore, as Rich knows, which you could evidence, Rich, the service business planning process was used as the vehicle, therefore, to carry those strategic principles, to embed them in our service planning, and they remain true and they have remained true up to the point at which the new strategy comes into place. So I'm not at all disregarding Audit Wales's report. I'm not. I think the points that are made are fair at headline. They are captured in the work that we've done in the new digital data strategy, but we are not, and we have not been operating in a vacuum and a void in between 2021 and now. And I think it's just important for us to just recognise that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I got a question from Sarah, Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Audit Wales for what I think is actually a very helpful challenge. And thank you, Peter, for the information about the work that has already been carried out. I know that there is a huge amount of digital excellence in this authority, but given the challenges we face in terms of resources, it's all the more important that we use digital to drive efficiency and have that customer focus, that citizen focus in terms of improving the citizen experience. So I think data, embedding that data-driven approach is absolutely the right way to go, and I'm heartened to hear what you're able to say today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are no more. Go on from Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Charlotte, you alluded to this, but I'd just like to follow up a little bit. It says in the report the fieldwork was done in May, June 23, yet the report is dated May 24. Can you explain why we're now a year out of date getting this information?
I might need to bring Jason for this one. He was involved in the work and I wasn't, but so just to set the context, we were doing this piece of work across all 22 councils. We're currently experiencing some resourcing issues, capacity within the Audit Wales team, and I think the project took a lot longer than expected. We needed to reach a certain point where we had enough of the work done across several councils to be able to moderate. So yeah, that there was quite a lengthy delay with this. I don't think I'm not aware there's any issues with the council. That was purely on an Audit Wales side. Jason, I don't know if you can add more, having been directly involved.
Yeah, all I can say is it did, having obviously multiple councils to do and trying to work the timescales of everyone's availability and so on. It did prolong the fieldwork periods for people. I know the draft actually of this report was completed in December, and that went through the processes. It's sort of half of the period between then and now was in producing, doing the fieldwork and producing the report, but then obviously getting through some of the elements of the report and the discussions between Audit Wales and your officers there. And that's partly, a lot of that had to be unpacked with regards to the response to the initial draft of the report and the developments that were ongoing. And so obviously that impacted in some respects, but overall that was it was a it wasn't the best for timing, I will say. We're certainly working on bringing that right down to not have a historic document and not have an audit for a birthday. We try to make sure that something is often said to us to just reduce that amount of time down. But like I said, the actual draft was, we produced it at the end of December, and then we went through the sort of the clearance process. So yeah, there was nothing in specific to the council that actually caused that delay, other than the process we were going through.
Yeah, I suppose sorry if I could just come back in. I think we've learned, some of the stumbling blocks from having a small core team who deliver this across all 22 councils. I suppose also I could take this opportunity to make the committee aware that because we do have a backlog of work, we're looking to reduce the work programme for 24-25, and there will likely be then some money returning to the council to reduce the fee, so that we have the opportunity then to catch up on our work programme. So from 25-26 onwards, we're producing the work within the year that work is set and that the budget is set for. So but yeah, huge apologies that it's been so late. I appreciate the later we report, the less relevant it is, and the less useful the report then is for the council to be able to take on board and put that into place.
Thank you, Charlotte. I've got a question from Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was just going to say, working with other councils, I know that that headline comment about the lack of a strategy was perhaps truer in some areas or in some council areas than others. But obviously, I think there's a certain amount of a generic approach to it, in as much as the SRS strategy is very much what Monmouthshire's invested in, along with their other partners. So I would hope that Audit Wales in the future could perhaps look at that in more detail, and perhaps we could look, and I know from Mike's report that which we've had today, that and other comments, that we're looking hopefully for more scrutiny in that area going forward to identify where we can get best value, because being so heavily invested, the likelihood of Monmouthshire want to change horses in midstream with that sort of approach is very unlikely. So I think that even having done all our research, I think that probably, providing we are getting best value, would be where we would choose to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this review very much at individual council strategies. And although we considered the fact that Monmouthshire was part of the SRS in terms of the collaboration part of the question, my understanding is that we didn't look at the sort of the regional approach that's taken part in most of Gwent. We did do a review of SRS a few years ago, but I think again that had a specific sort of focus which is quite different to this one. But yeah, to take on board the fact that I think there is a different setup in most of the Gwent councils with the SRS arrangement, and that does provide a huge number of benefits which I don't think are really reflected in the scope of this recent piece of work.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I think Richard wants to make a further comment.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, and just come back on Martin's point, and appreciate the update Charlotte and Jason gave as well. Just reiterating that we did have the draft report in December, as Charlotte and Jason have identified. There was a process of clearance, but having it in December allowed us to consider the draft findings in the substantive time we were developing the digital and data strategy. So from a council point of view, even though it's taken this time to get to you today, we have been able to use it to inform our forward-looking strategy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Audit Wales, for coming along and presenting the report. Can I ask Andrew to come in and close the item down if he wishes as chairman?
Thank you, Tony. So, Charlotte, Jason, I think you've heard the committee's comments as well as comments from officers in respect of some disquiet over how this report is positioned and the language within it. If I could ask you to take that feedback back to your senior management, and also as well bear in mind Martin's comments on language and approach to sort of to its contents when he mentioned that at the last meeting. So if you could take that back, please, and consider what, if any, revisions could be made. Many thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. Right, that was the starters of the meeting. We're going to go to the meat of the agenda now, which is item 5, the financial strategy. And if Audit Wales, you're going to stay with us, Charlotte? Okay, Charlotte will stay with us. We've got County Councillor Ben Callard, who's going to introduce this paper. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Chair. Just checking you can all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Firstly, apologies I can't be there in person today, but I'm pleased to introduce this financial strategy to the Governance and Audit Committee. This is the first medium-term financial strategy the Council has developed. The strategy sets out a path and approach for the Council to secure a sustainable financial future, one that allows the Council to deliver its policy aims and objectives as set out in the Community and Corporate Plan. For the first time, it takes a longer-term view, extending our horizon and facilitating a more proactive and preventative approach. This financial strategy sits alongside the Council's Community and Corporate Plan as part of our strategic framework. It sets out and provides a context for our current financial position, and it details the risks, opportunities and cost drivers that will influence this over the next 5 years. The strategy also looks to create a line of separation between the medium-term financial strategy and the medium-term financial plan, with the former there to inform the latter. Notwithstanding that the strategy draws on the most up-to-date medium-term financial plan modelling available. This financial strategy is set out in 3 distinct parts. Firstly, where the organisation is now, referred to as the challenge, and this is where we analyse the Council's current financial situation, including its main sources of income, its main financial commitments, and the level of reserves that it holds. The second is where it would like to be, which we're calling the response, and that's where we assess how the Council envisages its financial capacity and capability to facilitate the achievement of its strategic aims. This provides a longer-term financial vision for the Council, which is consistent with its overall strategic vision. And lastly, how it plans to get there, which is the delivery. And this contains actions which are designed to take the authority from where it currently stands from a financial viewpoint to where it would like to be. Over the last decade, the Council's faced significant challenges. We had the austerity years, had Brexit, the COVID-19 pandemic, and then we've seen wars in Europe and the Middle East. and this has resulted in persistently high inflation, and that's combined with a stagnant national economic situation. And we feel these impacts in terms of price wage inflation, high demand for high cost services, such as social care and homelessness, the impact on the cost of borrowing with increased interest rates. And since 2010-2011, core funding from Welsh Government has increased to us from 99 million to 126 million, which is a 26% increase. But it's a 15% reduction in real terms. And overall, since 2010-2011, we've delivered £77 million worth of savings from our annual revenue budget. Included in the strategy is a 4-year forecast. It highlights £34.7 million of more savings to be delivered over the medium-term financial plan to ensure a balanced budget's achieved. This is a base case scenario with sensitivity and risks considered later in the strategy. The requirements for these savings are also front-loaded in that the burden falls earlier in the period rather than later. The authority's medium-term financial plan model is continually updated. The brought forward modelling contains the base budgets of the authority overlaid with assumptions that are then updated in the light of updated data and information. And this allows prudent changes to be made to the modelling to enable the gap between the resources and expenditure to be highlighted. And I think one of the interesting things about this strategy is it does allow us really to spell out the modelling assumptions that we make and how we predict the trends are going to develop in the future. External data from sources such as the Office for Budget Responsibility, the Wales Fiscal Analysis Unit, support the budget assumptions applied within the modelling. This is further supported by the work that the Welsh local authorities produce through the Welsh Local Government Association that allow the assumptions that are made throughout the budget and financial planning process to be validated and challenged. The modelling assumptions are detailed on pages 18 and 19 of the strategy, and this is followed by analysis on the sensitivity of these assumptions and alternative scenarios. And finally, I'd like to thank all the officers involved in putting this strategy together. I believe it's a thorough and robust strategy, giving us a mark in the sand as we look to the future, and I look forward to answering any questions and receiving the feedback of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Do we have any questions from the floor? Peter will answer the questions. It's a long document. It's got to go before council next week. No.
I'll ask this.
Chair,
I'll ask the same question as I asked earlier on. Very broad, so it gives you plenty of scope for an answer. But this is a strategy which is very familiar. It's basically the same one we've had for a long, long time, inevitably, because it's dealing with the same problems. But are there any specific items which are causing you concern at the moment?
I was going to say...
I told you it'll give you lots of scope.
I think I'll answer the question, but I think I'll probably just give Councillor Callard an opportunity, maybe just to respond to maybe that latter part of your question, because I think, you know, Councillor Callard, you'll clearly have a perspective, I guess, in terms of what those challenges with us now and certainly ahead of us sort of broadly look like, at least anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Pete, and thanks for the question, Councillor Murphy. I think, you know, one of the nice things about this strategy is it does give us a chance to explain our assumptions and modelling and the sensitivity around those. So what we're doing this with the strategy in a way and setting out the current context is acknowledging that with these circumstances that we're predicting, you know, we set a certain course and path, but it does also model various scenarios where we might see higher expected demand, and you know, and therefore the cost pressures associated with that. All the expectations are at the moment is that public spending in the medium term is going to continue to be constrained. And I think we need to acknowledge that when we look out to the future. You know, while we all want the money taps to be turned on at some point, I don't think that the country is in a position to do that yet. So we need to be prudent when we look out to the future. We know there are risks on the horizon, and as I mentioned into my introduction, those risks are front-loaded into this plan. So of that £34 million, we see just over £12 million in, you know, within the next budgeting year in 25-26. That's going to present challenges in order to meet that gap. But also, it's, you know, as we look further out, our assumptions, I suppose, become less and less valid, and that the future is always unknown. And where we might have a reasonable idea what next year might look like now, the idea that we have of what it's going to look like in 28, 29, it's more of a guess, and that's why setting out these assumptions is so important. So things may change, but I think it's going to continue to be a financially constrained situation and also a volatile situation in the services which we deliver.
Thank you, Ben. Andrew is on holiday, but he wants to ask a question. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. So just to echo a couple of points already made, I thought personally it was an excellent document, and I'm to sort of express my thanks to Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Executive, and the wider team for producing this document. I think it gives an excellent, to quote Ben, a line in the sand, you know, an understanding in terms of where we're heading to, what the challenges are, and of course what the responses should be over time. So that's the first point. I'm very glad that it's structured in the way it is. It does give very good visibility to, for example, the underpinning assumptions, which are quite interesting. And of course, you know, one could challenge individually each of his assumptions, but in the round, they look about right. I suppose I have two questions or comments, and maybe Peter Davis could consider answering them. The document makes reference to a delivery plan, and it sets out that I think the FMB, the Financial Management Board, has a key responsibility for overseeing the delivery of that delivery plan. But I do wonder whether there's a role to play for this committee, and I'll ask Peter whether and to what extent this committee should oversee the progress being made in delivering that delivery plan. And the second point or question is in respect of the scenarios shown at figure 5. Yet again, really pleased about the fact that you've developed these scenarios and sensitivity analysis. That's really critical, especially those more adverse scenarios. But my personal reflection is, I think the downside scenario, which I think reflects low growth and high demand, didn't appear to be materially different from the base case scenario. I wonder whether Peter could say a few words that could give me comfort that the downside scenario is sufficiently extreme, but nonetheless still plausible. Thank you.
No, thank you. If I may, I'm going to cover off an aspect of Councillor Murphy's question because I think Ben responded well and in a robust and rounded way, and I'll come to Andrew's questions. The only supplementary, just back into Councillor Murphy's sort of observation and questions. It's almost an acknowledgement back. I think. Yes, it's the first medium-term financial strategy the council has had, but I think as is acknowledged in the covering report, as in the strategy itself, you know, we come off the back of good foundations here in terms of you know, financial management and our financial arrangements, notwithstanding obviously the challenges that Ben has talked to well. So your question was one of, you know, just trying to get an understanding as to, you know, what's new in that. And actually Andrew in his point is drawing some of that out, because the delivery plan, I think, in particular, looks to make some levels of firm commitment of sort of strengthening of our financial management arrangements. So again, not exhaustive, but, you know, matters of, you know, full rollout of budget holder training, that undertaking of the assessment against SIPFA's financial management code. And again, I think, the committee, back to Andrew's question, has a role in that, and hearing the output and the outcome from that level of review. So there's certainly a level of additionality in terms of the strengthening of the robustness of arrangements. Probably hand in hand with that, the most important bit, and I expect this to be a feature of discussion through scrutiny tomorrow, I think, Councillor Callard, is around the point that you refer to. We have a £34 million shortfall over the 4 years, over the medium term. And I think Charlotte, as per the recommendation, I think that stands with, all 22 councils actually across Wales in the previous work that Audit Wales has done around financial sustainability. The need for a financial strategy that looks over the medium term and actually provides levels of confidence of how savings will be delivered. And I think, within the delivery plan, there's a really important aspect there in terms of this change and improvement programme of work that needs to now evolve out of the back of the strategy. That's not a matter exclusively for finance, that's for the organisation politically and senior management to grapple with. It's not an easy one, and I think Councillor Callard has recognised that one. To Andrew's questions, the delivery plan, so let's just acknowledge the fact that we are making commitment here. So when we talk about tempo, the strategy puts the strategic framework in. It's for 5 years. I don't expect us to be coming back, within that period to do any wholesale revision of it, because as to the introduction from Councillor Callard, this is interplay between strategy and plan. The tempo of the plan will be now every 6 months. It's been generally annually. That tempo is being stepped up to 6 monthly, and you will see within the delivery plan, I think, the need to strengthen some of the sophistication in our modelling, particularly around some of those demand pressures, inflation, etc., which I think if we actually look back in terms of asking that question, how successful was your modelling versus the reality of where you ended up, and often, and certainly in the last 2 years, and I think John's on the call, we've put provision into the modelling for what we call pressures, £7.5 million. The last 2 years, I think, John, we've probably gone towards, 10, 15, 20 million. Okay, and therefore, the provisions sort of stepped its way out of the modelling, and then the real pressures have come in. But you don't want that sort of shock and surprise in your modelling when you're looking to take an orderly, structured approach to your budgeting. So we've got, we need to inbuild greater levels of sophistication into that, because there's one thing for sure, the money taps, to Councillor Callard's point, are not going to be turned on. We need a really sharp eye on demand pressure, because that's still being felt, by public services post-pandemic. So as to those point, to my point of tempo, and back to Andrew's point, the 6 monthly tempo, I think I'd expect the medium-term financial plan, inclusive of how we are performing, the progress being made on the performance framework, the delivery plan, therefore to be inbuilt in those 6 monthly updates. And if that comes into Governance and Audit Committee, hopefully that will satisfy the committee in terms of assuring itself in terms of progress. In terms of the scenarios, I think I'm going to probably hand over to John, who's got his hand up anyway. So, John, as to whether you've got anything further to add, but just to pick up that specific question of Andrew's in regards to scenario planning.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Peter. This has been a kind of point of discussion, I guess, over the last 3 to 6 months in developing the plan. I think we've been clear that, as Peter says, we need more sophistication within our modelling around some of the assumptions that we're bringing in. We've been clear that the Financial Management Code advises against using best and worst scenarios, which councils in the past may well have fallen into the process of doing. So we've tried to be a little bit more sophisticated than that. and realistic, I guess, in some of our assumptions and workings around this. So we've used our experience, certainly over, the past 4 to 5 years where we've had significant volatility. It's given us an insight into perhaps what some of those most extreme measures and impacts can be. So the pandemic, Brexit, as Councillor Callard has outlined. So we've been careful not to bring in, I guess, some of those most extreme cases and almost, if for want of a better word, cry wolf in terms of some of our modelling. I think there's a credibility issue there if we simply say, well, everything's going to go against us, funding's going to drop, demand goes up through the roof, inflation goes back to double digits. So we have to be realistic. Our experience tells us that, whilst that could be possible, it's at the very extreme end of what could happen. So I think our strategy, takes account of that experience we've seen, and doesn't naturally assume that those most acute scenarios are going to plan out. So whilst the differential, I guess, to Andrew's point is, seems quite small. I think maybe we've become accustomed to millions and tens of millions around this kind of post-pandemic period. The differential for me is big, and I think it outlines there quite reasonably what our realistic scenarios can be. I think as ever, different people will have different approaches to the assumptions that we've modelled, and the last thing probably to say is that whilst this is a line in the sand, as we've heard, the modelling is live. It changes day by day, and those 6 monthly updates into cabinet, which is the commitment of the strategy, will be key in keeping on top of these modelling assumptions, which will change regularly. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. No more questions from the floor? Nobody's got their hand up?
Yeah, Chair, if I
can. Go on then, carry on.
Just linking into John's point, which is, I think it's a really helpful explanation. That table we're talking about, figure 5, which talks about low, medium and high, there's no definitions in there of any of that stuff. And sort of echoing back to the online chairs, the real chairs, comment earlier about understanding what those mean, and perhaps there isn't enough variation. I hear exactly what worst case scenario is not a great idea. I just wonder whether low demand is actually for the birds. I can't imagine anything actually going down. The demand seems to be only going one way. And so I think that's almost, it's not worth the think it's printed on to suggest that demand is going to in some way reduce in any way, shape or form across social services, across homelessness, across refugees, across education. They're only going in one direction, aren't they? So I'd like to understand a little bit more what we mean by high demand. Is it 5% more? Is it 10% more? And whether these cases therefore are extreme enough, I guess, is my point. And as long as you've got that in hand in terms of looking at what the modelling is, then I'm comfortable. But low and high by themselves don't mean an awful lot. And I just wonder, therefore, perhaps, whether there's a role for Audit Wales in getting people to be consistent across the 22, because I hear John's point about crying wolf. And if there was some consistency what low meant for all local authorities and what high meant for all local authorities, they could actually use a common language, couldn't we? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, inflation may have gone down to 2%, but we're not going to reclaim the other minus 8%, are we? So prices are going up, and I noticed that the comprehensive schools, and social care, 70-odd million quid. A couple of percentage on that, it just goes up and up. I know we've opened a new home in Crick or near Caldecott. Hopefully that will be more efficient than what we had before. Whether it will bring costs down, I don't know. I think they're going upwards and upwards. Oh, John, carry on.
Thanks, Chair. I think you touched on some important points, Chair. I think links to the response I was just going to give to Martin's question. I think, this is to the very point of being more sophisticated around our approach and not relying, on a generic percentage in terms of some of our uplifts. So we're recognising that we're taking preventative measures within some of those high-cost service areas, social care, homelessness, and that will work through and hopefully deliver benefits for us over the medium term. So when we talk to low demand, that isn't as such lower than we're experiencing. It's taking on board what those measures can produce for us in terms of cost benefits and how we can mitigate some of that cost pressure through those preventative measures, but also potentially, moving those costs elsewhere, working with partners and such like in terms of developing that approach to service delivery. So to the very point, it's about getting that sophistication around our modelling and not simply relying on, inflation's 4%. Demand has been at this for a long time, so we'll just go with that again. So, I just wanted to make that point, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to have some closing comments from Ben on his observations of the discussion and the way forward before I bring in Andrew to close the item down.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the feedback. I take on board the points around some of the definitions around the scenarios. It may be an area that we could look to provide a little bit more detail. I think the points made about, the modelling and the assumptions are all very fair. It's, when I don't know how many services the authority provides, but it's probably in the hundreds, and providing accurate modelling for the costs of all of these different services and the demand into the future is a challenge. And it's one that we'll continue to learn from our experiences on and get better at. But I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the thanks from Andrew Blackmore to the team involved in putting it together as well. I'd echo those comments that I think it is a good document and should provide us with a good framework from which to build with the medium-term financial plan in the autumn.
Thank you, Ben. I understand this report is going to a select committee next week. Is it, or has it been?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, right. We don't take a vote as an audit committee, but I would support the paper and hopefully the select committee has the same views. Andrew, could you conclude the item, please?
So thank you, Tony. Yeah, if we could turn our attention back to the covering paper and look at the recommendations to Council under paragraph 2. And if you look at paragraphs 2.1 through to 2.3, I think based on the discussions, I think we are content to approve the MTFS, approve the associated delivery plan and performance framework, delegating authority is appropriate, and we are content that a 6-monthly update of the MTFP to Cabinet, as well as our good selves and the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee, is both desired and indeed actually very important. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Jonathan. Right, the next item on the agenda is one for Jan, draft annual governance statement. If you could take us through that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so in accordance with the requirements of the Accounts and Audit Wales Regulations 2014, an annual governance statement must be produced and included with the Council's year-end financial statements. So the Council is required to self-assess its governance and performance as outlined in the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021. And this annual governance statement looks backwards and details the effectiveness of the Council's governance arrangements as of the 31st of March 2024. Therefore, it must be noted that some of the areas considered have moved forward since then, such as the strategic risk management policy and also the people strategy, which were both discussed at the last meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee and approved by Cabinet in June. So to confirm, the annual governance statement will be included within the Council's draft statement of accounts for the 23-24 financial year. So corporate governance is about doing the right thing at the right time for the right people in an open and transparent way. So for that end, the Council has a code of corporate governance, and this is previously presented to the Council's Audit Committee in June 2020 and approved by Cabinet in September 21. So this code of corporate governance has been developed in line with 7 principles which form the Council's overarching requirements for acting in the public interest. The annual governance statement confirms that Monmouthshire County Council has, for the financial year 2023-24, conducted a review of the effectiveness of these governance arrangements, and this has concluded that the arrangements have been accorded in line with the principles as set out in the Council's Code of Corporate Governance. Consequently, the Council's overall governance arrangements have been assessed as being effective and providing a sound framework for delivering services to the citizens of Monmouthshire. This statement outlines the Council's responsibility for ensuring proper standards and the safeguarding of public money, as well as the arrangements for the management of risk. So my role as the Chief Internal Auditor is to collate this governance statement, but the ownership sits with the strategic leadership team and ultimately the leader of the council and the chief executive, who are both required to sign the document as part of the council's statement of accounts. So to confirm, the draft annual governance statement has been challenged, considered by and contributions sought from the leader of the council, the cabinet member for resources, the chair of this committee, the chief executive, the deputy chief executive and chief officer of resources, who is the section 151 officer, the Chief Officer for Law and Governance, who is our monitoring officer, members of the strategic leadership team, the Performance and Data Insight Manager, along with a number of other key senior officers across the organisation. So the effective governance arrangements as set out in the body of the document have been operated continuously throughout the year, and these will be in place up until the date of the approval of the accounts. The remainder of the document sets out further detail of the review of the Council's governance arrangements. In undertaking the review of governance, the Council has considered each of the principles set out within the Code of Corporate Governance and assessed what the Council has in place to support each of the 7 principles, their effectiveness and any areas for future improvement. So in summary, it's been concluded that 6 out of the 7 governance principles have been operating with a very good effectiveness rating. The further principle, which was Principle E, developing the entity's capacity, including the capability of its leadership and the individuals within it, was rated as adequate, as some of the actions were behind schedule and measures were falling short of their planned targets. Overall, the annual governance statement review of effectiveness was an improvement on the previous year when only 5 principles were rated as very good. Although this one area was rated as adequate, a number of areas have already been implemented for this over the first couple of months of the current financial year, and the Chief Executive has tasked SLT to ensure that this will be rated higher as a very good opinion next year. So the Council recognises that there are always areas for improvement within its corporate governance processes. 10 areas have been identified within the annual governance statement and an action plan has been included. This will be monitored by the strategic leadership team throughout the course of the 24-25 financial year. Overall, I can confirm that the governance arrangements in place at Monmouthshire County Council continue to be regarded as being fit for purpose. Therefore, I'm asking committee to contribute to the appropriateness and the content of the statement, consider the review of effectiveness and the assessment made against each of the governance principles, and that overall the committee endorses the annual governance statement for inclusion within the draft statement of accounts for 23-24. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jan. We've got Rodri.
Thanks, Chair. Aspirationally, I assume make the assumption that the council would like all of them to be excellent. So just wondering in terms of the AFIs, and does action, so if there are like three AFIs, if they achieve them, would that mean an upgrade in the score? And if there are no AFIs, areas of improvement, is there any dialogue between audit and the council? Any suggestions about how they could improve scores?
Yep, thank you, Rodri. So yeah, as you quite rightly said, we're obviously striving for excellence in each of the areas. I think overall that's quite difficult to get if you were being honest with yourself. For a local authority to be scoring themselves as excellent, I'm sure us as internal audit would probably question certain areas. Our external auditors would probably do likewise as well. But obviously that challenge is good for the process. That's what we're striving for. Not having any areas of future improvement wouldn't necessarily mean that it would be rated as excellent, because we might take that view that actually we don't have any areas that we can overall improve, but overall we just feel that it's not quite there, and being honest with ourselves over it. That's what the whole statement and the challenge process, and I've had those discussions through SLT where they thought, well, one area might be lower, one area might be higher, and we've obviously come to a consensus view within the statement.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to ask, we're looking at around the rule of law comment, and the role of the Chief Legal Officer or Monitoring Officer and their support of the Section 151 officer, Peter, where that, so it falls within governance, but that relationship appears to fall outside of the remit of this committee. So I wonder where those, where that governance and assurance plays out.
Sorry, just to get right underneath the specificity of the question. Your question is one of that point of rule of law, and as to where that's captured, I guess, and beyond governance and audit committee. So that would be through, I guess, the monitoring officer's responsibilities to obviously report as the Constitution requires, standards committee, and obviously matters being brought through that mechanism and process. So it's achieved through those means, and it's an interesting one actually, just in terms of the Constitution, and in terms of that's it's a matter for council ultimately, in terms of where the reporting line sort of maintains itself. So yeah, it works on those bases.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, hopefully not in Monmouthshire, but but the Section 151 officer, that role is going to fall probably at least within one or more councils within Wales, is probably going to have those legal challenges around potential bankruptcy. So I was just wondering, if we were moving in that direction, how this committee would necessarily sort of have any role in that, in the governance of how that was achieved.
Okay, yeah, so I guess first off, important just to recognise it's not the case actually in all councils. The Section 151 officer of the council, the monitoring officer and the head of paid service chief executive, the golden triangle as it's referred, those three individuals all situate themselves on the strategic leadership team. And you would naturally expect outside of strategic leadership teams in terms of the formal meetings that we work issues through of various natures and where they overlap in terms of levels of direct statutory responsibility. So financial distress in terms of the way that manifests, I hold clear responsibilities, often referred to as Section 114. If I wanted to enact that, and that's a responsibility that falls to me alone, I can look to offer of that view and go direct into council if I so wished. You wouldn't do that. If you wanted to hold those levels of professional relationships properly intact, because you need to carry an organisation and those with other statutory responsibilities with you. So it's probably not written, but legislation allows and requires me to go into council, as I said, direct. A governance and audit committee would clearly have a very clear interest, and it would be in my interest as well, in terms of working the sequence through, and in terms of information being shared and advice. So.
Okay, thank you. I've got Andrew wants to come in. Hello, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jan, for introducing this paper and, of course, your hard work in coordinating the underlying activity. It's a very important paper, and it sets out overall a very good picture. So I think this committee should pay credit to all officers and indeed the Cabinet and Council for the good work in terms of maintaining an effective overall governance framework. I have 2 points. The first, quite easy. In a few moments' time, could you make reference to any changed guidance from SIPFA or other organisations in respect of the annual governance statement? And then secondly, in a point of detail, could I turn your attention to area for improvement number 4, under the action plan for this AGS, which says review the minute-taking process to ensure accurate minutes are held of all meetings. Could you shed some light in terms of what that's referring to? Because on the face of it, that sounds quite worrying. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, in terms of SIPFA and their advice, we believe that that's currently going through processes at the moment, and they're looking at the annual governance statement as part of that. So once we know where we are with it, we can obviously report back into committee and obviously keep you involved as chair as well. In terms of action 4, so review the minute-taking process to ensure accurate minutes are held of all meetings. This was within last year's annual governance statement with the previous Chief Officer for People and Governance. They wanted to originally look at digitising the minute-taking process further. We've completed an internal audit review of democratic services, which will be reported to the next committee, not the next committee, the following committee meeting in September as part of my Q1 update. It received a limited audit opinion. One of the areas that we looked at was the minute-taking process, and it was being concluded that the minutes were not adequate for a number of different council committees. And this is something that we're currently working through with the Chief Officer for Law and Governance and the Senior Officer for Democratic Services as well. The issue was that minutes would basically not detail the actual discussion, it would just provide a link to a YouTube recording. And obviously that doesn't tell anything, and if YouTube goes down, whether now or in the future, then our minutes wouldn't actually accurately reflect any discussion that happened during committee meetings. So that's something that's being worked through at the moment with the Chief Officer.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, that's quite interesting, thanks.
No more questions. Regarding that one report which is adequate, in a year's time we'll be on another report from you, on the annual report. If there's been no improvement, you won't be pleased, I know, but would it be appropriate to have a working report, say a verbal report, at the end of the year to show progress?
Yeah, so obviously we'll be in this situation this time next year in terms of me presenting, hopefully myself presenting an annual governance statement for next year, for this current year, sorry. Obviously it'll be within the gift of the committee if they want to, if it is decided that it remains as adequate, if they want to discuss it further with other chief officers. I can say at the moment that a number of the actions for that area have already been implemented or are in train to be implemented quite shortly, so I wouldn't have thought we'll be in that position. I think we're probably already looking at good at the moment, and hopefully as they progress throughout the year, we'll then be into the very good category.
Okay, can we leave that to your judgment then? I'd like to endorse the report unless anybody got any particular points. It will go to council next week. I'm just asking the committee, would they support that?
Happy with it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Andrew, you're off the hook, you're okay. Right, the last item is the government, or the last item one, the Government and Audit Committee Work Forward Plan. Can we look at that? Find it on here somewhere. Is that under your remit, Richard? Or Peter? Your Peter? Or Wendy?
So I think it's just to acknowledge that it's been updated to reflect.
Yeah, looks straightforward to me.
Yeah, and it's reviewed on an ongoing basis ahead of meeting cycles. So and it's been updated accordingly. I think Wendy has done it. So it reflects what we're expecting to see in the late July and September meetings, at least anyway. So
okay, I propose we note that report then. The last item, but one, is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. And the final note item is dated next meeting is the 31st of July. Now, it's only a couple of weeks' time, and I think, they've been compressed together to get this out of the way, hasn't it?
Yes, I think, I guess the timing of the general election obviously affected our timings in terms of bringing some of the enabling strategies through. So, I'm grateful to the committee, to the chair, just in terms of being flexible with us in order to get this additional meeting in. It's allowed us to ensure that we get ourselves up through Cabinet Council here for the financial strategy and get that approved before the summer recess. Otherwise, we were going to be out into September and really didn't want that delay. The reason for the need for the meeting at the end of July, John will probably be sick of talking by the end of that meeting, but together with other colleagues, we've got Treasury reports, but also importantly the authorities' draft accounts and the trust funds accounts as well. So an important meeting.
Hello, Andrew. Could you make some closing remarks before we close the meeting? Or do you want to?
Well, yes, again, just to reiterate a couple of points. I want to thank officers for all the hard work. We've considered a range of papers. I think we've had overall a good level of discussion and challenge, and I think we can be content with the overall shape of council, recognising, of course, that they're facing significant ongoing challenges, whether they be financial or operational in nature. But I think we're in a good place currently. So thank you one and all.
Okay, Andrew, enjoy your holiday. That's the meeting closed.
Thank you. Cheers.